So, ladies and gentlemen, if I could get your attention, we're about to begin. The legislators are on their way, several of which were detained today from activities up on the Hill. But we're going to start like we always start here in Hingham with the Pledge of Allegiance. So please rise, face the close. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Take your seats, please. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening to this town hall style forum, sponsored, of course, by our secretary. We're honored to have our Secretary of Veteran Service here, Fransico Urena, to my right. Starting on the end to my left, we have the Women's Program Manager from the VA, Boston, Carolyn Mason-Wholley. Hingham Selectman Paul Healy. Hingham Selectman Karen Johnson. The President of the Massachusetts Veterans Service Officers Association, Jeff Chunglo. Representative Jamie Murphy. Wow, hey! Come on down. We have a few other folks in the audience that I'd like to mention that are here in support and to provide benefit information tonight about veterans. This will be like a town hall style, a Q&A, if you will. From Hull, VSO William Leamy. Bill? From Weymouth, George Ponce from Weymouth. So I'm just going to read a brief statement about the Department of Veteran Services. In case some of you don't know, we've been providing benefits to veterans and their dependents since 1861. From the date of that commitment by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that ensured that no individual who served his or her state or nation with honor during a period of war or other conflict would ever be pauperized or forced to turn to public welfare for assistance. The Massachusetts Executive Office and the Mass House and Senate have both shown their continued concern for the welfare of the veteran and his dependent with the fullest support of one of the most comprehensive programs for veterans in this country. The Department of Veteran Services and local Department of Veteran Services lead the way in providing these benefits. One of the most widely known or used benefit that we have in Massachusetts is under Chapter 115, or as we like to call it, MGL 115. The Commonwealth provides a uniform program of financial and medical assistance for veterans and their dependents who qualify to receive the necessary financial assistance for food, shelter, clothing, housing supplies, medical care, in accordance with a formula which takes into account the number of dependents and income from all sources. So with that said, and I failed to introduce myself, my name is Keith Jermyn. I'm the Director of Veteran Services for the town of Hingham. I'm also a Senior Chief Petty Officer in the U.S. Navy Seabees. I know that... I see that Greg Denton is here from Senator O'Connor's office. If you'd like to, would you like to say a few words? Or?
Thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight. I appreciate the attendance. It's great to see everyone here. I'm here on behalf of Senator Patrick O'Connor. He's still actually in session right now. The Senate seems to be, looks like they'll be up there late tonight, so he sends his regrets for not being able to attend. I want to thank Secretary Urena for coming down here to the South Shore this evening. We're very well served down here for our veterans. I believe Senator O'Connor is extremely grateful to the service and assistance that Secretary Urena and his office provides, as well as our veteran service officers here down on the South Shore with George, Bill, and Keith, and the other towns that we represent. I want to thank Keith for assisting us in hosting this. Representative Moschino will be here shortly as well, and Representative Murphy for co-hosting this event with Senator O'Connor. So I thank you all for the assistance and for being here tonight. We look forward to hearing from you on some of the things that you'd like to see Also an update on some of the legislation that has been going on up at the State House, and then some information that Keith, as a veteran service officer here in Hingham, can provide to the veterans, and also Secretary Urena and his department. So thank you all for coming this evening. I appreciate it.
So at this time, I'd like to bring up the Secretary of Veteran Services, Fransico Urena, to give us an update of what's going on in the world of the Commonwealth of Mass and veterans and how we are treating our veterans' independence.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, and good evening to each and every one of you all. It is a true privilege, as always, to travel across this Commonwealth and engage with veterans and families. And before we do, I want to recognize if there are any Gold Star families in the audience. I don't see any, but I know that, we do have some Gold Star families. Thank you for being here, of course. I know that we do have some veteran families here as well, and we know here in Massachusetts when a veteran serves, the family sacrifices, and it is the cognizant aspect of how when we connect and deliver benefits and services and deliver policies, that we ensure that those policies reflect the not just the veterans, but those of their families. And so to all of our veterans here, thank you for your commitment, your service to our country, to our veteran service officers, our president of MVSOA, our state representatives, our selectmen, and our partners at the VA. Thank you, because it is a true partnership, and that is how we are effective here in Massachusetts, across the Commonwealth, and so very proud of what's going on here in Hingham and in the South Shore. Superstars all around, ensuring that the commitment, ensuring that the benefits and the delivery of such are maximized. We couldn't be prouder of that aspect. And so we have been focused on many fronts, ensuring that our Gold Star families receive benefits and services, and the annuity that is paid to our Gold Star families and veterans who are 100% service connected. Most recently, Governor Charlie Baker filed and funded the aspect of closing the gap, a $7 million investment so that Gold Star families could receive the annuity from the date of death of their loved one and not just from the aspect of the date of application. And with our partners in the legislature who filed the bill and were able to get it through, the governor was able to, in the course of the budget, to ensure that that was there. It is relatively a new gap that was closed. And we're very proud of that. And essentially, it was an aspect of outreach. $2,000 is not a lot throughout the year as a benefit, but it is a commitment to those families that their loved ones are not forgotten, that they are still part of our communities, and is a way for us all, including our VSOs, veteran service officers, and to engage with these families and have a sense of continuation and commitment. We have great networks. See, we're putting a lot of focus on returning veterans, but not just those from post 9/11, but any veterans that are returning into our communities, whether they're moving into Massachusetts from one way or another, they're transitioning from institutional or location, but also those veterans that are returning here from combat now that we are on and approaching almost 17 years of such since 9/11. And so it is that sense of connection that we could offer here. But I'm excited into what is going on here in Hingham in your minds and what questions do you all have. So I'm looking forward to the question and answer period, Chief, to the aspect of tonight's program, and also a lot of the networking that will happen afterwards. I think that is when these sort of town halls have the best sense of potential of connection and commitments. Like always, we empower our veteran service officers with the best knowledge. Just over the last couple of hours, we just wrapped up 4 days worth of training. It was quoted as one of the best training sessions that our seasoned VSOs have received. And so it is through that aspect of 4 days worth of training that we can deliver the best sense of knowledge, the best sense of programming, and other opportunities so that they could be brought locally to our veterans, our families in need. But also, the other aspect that the Office of Veteran Services does is have opportunities for those who haven't served to be able to volunteer and get involved and have a sense of connection to our veterans and make a difference in their lives. So thank you so very much, and I'm looking forward to the next phase. Appreciate it.
And so like the Secretary said, we will be moving shortly into the question and answer period. We are trying to wait till we have the full panel here so that we can answer your questions that are near and dear to your heart. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Representative Jamie Murphy to speak just for a minute, a brief comments on what he's doing up on the Hill. And I know his office and mine have been working very closely as of late on some legislation. Maybe he can enlighten us on some of that.
Good evening, everybody. To my colleagues in town government, good evening, and to my colleagues in the state legislature, to Patrick O'Connor, who's at the Senate right now in session. And the way it works, on Thursdays, the Senate has been in session, and Wednesdays we're in session, so Patrick couldn't be here tonight. Joan Moschino, who serves with me, represents Hingham. She's on the way. She'll be here in a few minutes. But this was a group effort on behalf of the veteran service officers and the legislature and my colleagues in town government to have this forum. You know, I've been in office now 17 years, representing two of the greatest towns in the greatest region, and maybe I'm biased, but in Massachusetts. And I've been in office a long time. Today is an important day because we can take questions and open up the discussion as to what is on your minds. Secretary Urena does an amazing job. He's across the state every day working on your behalf. But we thought that we would have a local event tonight to hear what is on your minds, to hear what's important to you, and to open up a discussion about what we can do to better serve all of you. In my family, there's many veterans. My father is a veteran of the U.S. Navy, came from Ireland, and the first thing he did was join the Navy. So in a lot of our families, there's a lot of proud veterans. We know, looking out here right now, that there's a lot of proud service members who have served. We thank you for all of your work, and all of your families who supported you over the years. We thank them too. It's a pleasure and an honor to serve all of you in the legislature, and I look forward to the discussion tonight and to see what we can do to better serve you in the legislature and in town government. So thank you very much.
So just before we get to the Q&A, as I mentioned, the president of our Massachusetts Veterans Service Officer Association is here, Jeff Chunglo. I'm going to bring him forward to tell you a little bit about some of the legislation that you may or may not be aware of that's going on currently, what our position or what our stance is on it, and how we are able to help you and dependents throughout the Commonwealth with the things that we hear on the deck plates. Bill, George, and myself, we hear a lot of things that we try to do here. A lot of it's local. I bring a lot of it up to both Karen, Paul, and Mary regarding taxes. Property taxes seems to be one of the biggest things. We're working some things currently now, and hopefully that comes up in your questions. But right now, I'm proud to introduce our president, Jeff Chunglo.
So thank you. It's an honor to be here. So I represent the 250 plus Massachusetts veteran service officers and their staff that help support the veterans and their dependents throughout the state. So as such, we've been working closely with the staff of the Department of Veteran Services. Like the Secretary mentioned, we just concluded our annual training, which was a great training session for the week. And that's something that we continue to do, and it focuses on our training and overall certification. VSOs are required to be certified and trained, so it maintains that level. So no matter where you go, whether you're North Adams or down on the Cape or here in Hingham, if you go see your veteran service officer, you're going to get the same information no matter where you go throughout the state and the same level of service. So part of my job as well has been working with our legislative committee to examine the legislation that's been put forth for veteran issues, pro, con, provide our feedback and input and recommendations for changes. So yesterday there was a hearing at the Joint Committee of Veterans Affairs and Federal Affairs. So since we were at training, our legislative aide provided our testimony to that committee. There are a number of bills. There were none that we were opposing. There were a couple that I just wanted to touch on briefly that we were in support of. However, we would like to see some minor changes, and that was House Bill 2766, an act relative to annuities for widows and surviving relatives of veterans. So, and I believe this was already addressed by the Secretary, that they are going to go back. This was to fund the gap between if a person didn't know about the annuity and there was a delay in them applying for that benefit, that benefit is going to go retroactive to the date of the death of the veteran, not the date of the application. So we are all in support of that. There was a 90-day limit on that, so we were looking to have that extended just to eliminate any confusion in that. And then the other one was House Bill 1921, an act relative to exempt Gold Star annuity payments. We firmly believe that all Gold Star parents, yes, you've made that ultimate sacrifice. You've lost a loved one serving the Commonwealth. There's also another category of individuals, the 100% service-connected disabled veterans, that are also eligible for annuity payments. So we wanted to see that payment that is extended to Gold Star parents also extended to 100% service-connected disabled veterans. So we felt that that was important. Really, that's about it. The other legislation that was put forward again this week, there are no issues with those legislative issues that we were not in favor of this year, which was very good. So there are a lot of very good bills that were put forward. I can speak to that individually afterwards if you'd like. I do have the complete list, but I won't go through that tonight because we are in support of all of those bills. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, and thanks goes out to Senator O'Connor and Greg Denton and Lou Rizzo from his staff. They've provided some refreshments at the back. There's some coffee. As he said, as this becomes more of an open forum at the end or during, feel free to get up and get yourself. And the American Legion, Post 120 here in Hingham, has provided some water, so feel free to partake in that. At this time, I'd like to recognize our representative from Hingham, Hull, and North Situate, Representative Joe Moschino.
Thank you so much, and sincere apologies for arriving a little bit late. I was presenting at a conference, and getting off the Cape is not always the easiest thing. But Keith, I just wanted to thank you and the town of Hingham for hosting everyone and for bringing everyone together tonight. This was actually something that I conceived of, and what I'm really excited to do is to have the secretary down here and to sharing all of his strategies and his commitment to the veterans in our community. But when we get towards the end of the program, what I'd really love to hear from is all of you, especially as a freshman representative, and we have a freshman senator. We're interested in where the access barriers are, where are the challenges, what are the things that we can do for you. The Valor Act was a wonderful piece of legislation that our colleagues like Jamie Murphy had worked on and voted into law. And now there are a lot of smaller bills that are working around the edges to try to bring parity for some of the smaller changes that we've just heard about. And I think that it's important that we hear from each of you just to talk about where the challenges are, where we could do better providing services, where we've the little insights or the big insights, especially for those of the veterans that are younger or women that maybe we haven't heard from in the past. So just thank you very much for all coming out tonight. Thank you to the town of Hingham for hosting us, and thank you to the secretary for coming down again and gracing us with your presence. You really do such a wonderful job for all of us. So I'll leave my remarks at that and continue with the program. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you. So as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts veterans population is currently on a decrease, believe it or not, those are the statistics that we received over the conference the last 4 days. But there is one segment, a smaller segment of our population of veterans that is on the increase, and that is women veterans. Women veterans in the Commonwealth are showing a substantial increase, and I would like to bring up at this time the VA Women's Program Manager, Carolyn Mason-Wholley, just to give us a little insight on that segment of the population.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. And I brought my fan club in the back. I travel with them, you know. But thank you for having me here. I actually live close by. There are several very familiar faces in the audience tonight. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about the women veterans in Massachusetts. One of the things to know is that many of you do not say, I'm a women veteran. You might say, I've served in the military, but I wasn't in combat, therefore I'm not a veteran. Well, that thinking is wrong, and we're here to change that. I work very closely with Secretary Urena's Women Veterans Network, serving on their steering committee, and as a member of the Governor's Advisory Committee on Women Veterans, and hope to continue that work to really bring forward the specific challenges for women veterans here in our city, in our state. Women veterans very often are reluctant to come into the VA to receive care, or they're reluctant to come out to an event like this tonight because they're busy making dinner and putting the kids to bed and supervising homework and driving the carpool. And there's a lot of challenges that we face with women who are trying to work full-time and go to school and parent their children and be the caretaker for parents as well. That's another issue that we're seeing more frequently in the women veteran population. So ideas on how we can do this better, what's needed, and how we can spread the word that it's okay to come together and be here and proudly wear the hat that says I was in the Navy or the Marine Corps, and proudly wear that hat that says I'm a disabled American veteran or a member of the American Legion. That's probably one of our most difficult tasks to date, is bringing the community together. I ask for your ideas and also for your help in doing that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. So at this time, I'm going to act as the moderator. I would ask that you please come forward to the microphone stand with your question, and I'll help you with it. It's not that difficult. The reason I have you do that, not just shout it out, I know we're in a kind of a small room, is this is being televised for our local public access channel TV, and will then be sent from our main distributor there to the other cities and towns that are in the district of Senator O'Connor and Rep. Murphy and Rep. Moschino. So I would ask that you kindly come forward if you have a question, and we'll start off now. I do see in the back, while someone's thinking about a question, I do see in the back Lieutenant Colonel David Henke. He is the outreach coordinator for the VA, Visit 1, all of Boston. And if we get a really tough question, we'll pull him up to answer it for you. So, so the floor is open.
Good evening. My name is Larry McGinnis. I'm from Hull. I'm a disabled veteran. I've been in the service since I've been 16, on and off. National Guard, United States Marine Corps active. National Guard, Army Reserves. National Guard deployed right out of this building, 1058. Speaking of women in the service, we were commanded by a female. We had 12 active, very good soldiers, females, went over to the desert with us. Some came back. They all did a fantastic job. The commander ended up being, last I heard, a major, and she also did a fantastic job. And the VA at that time was struggling to handle women, opened up a new ward, did a fantastic job. I have some questions. I've had a lot of questions, but I have a question for you, sir. And it's on the House Rule in Congress 5015, and it's called the Combat Injured Veterans Fairness Act. Can you tell me anything about that, sir? Do you know anything about that? All right, what it talks about is missing money. I got to put these on, too. Former Army officer discovered DOD illegally withheld millions of disability payments to combat disabled veterans. The federal government has illegally withheld approximately $78 million in disability payments to nearly 14,000 combat injured veterans since 1991. According to the Army Veterans and attorney Tom Moore of the National Veterans Legal Service Program, Moore discovered the problem while working on lawsuits involving service members who were discharged in the past because they were suffering from PTSD. U.S. Senator Mark Warner, Democrat, Virginia, and John Boozman, Republican from Arkansas, introduced the Combat Injured Veterans Act. Fairness Act. In March, to stop the improper tax withholding and enabled affected veterans to recover their money. Moore managed the Lawyers Serving Warriors program, recently explained what went wrong and how the combat disabled veterans may be able to recover their money. And it goes on, and it ends up that it comes down to tax refund. Wounded vets to receive back taxes in March. Washington Wire article. Individuals receiving a federal tax refund also would be eligible for a state tax refund in state and income tax. Section 104.8, paragraph 4 of the Internal Revenue Code excludes from gross income amounts received as a pension, annuity, or similar allowance of personal injuries or sickness resulting in active service in the armed forces of their country. When I come across this, I was medically discharged. When I came back from the Gulf, I was put on medical hold. I was injured in the Gulf, and I ended up having a couple operations when I come home and being held up at Devon's. And when I got out, I got my my discharge pay and my medical service honorable discharge. Out of that amount of money, they took quite a bit of money out of me, right? And when I come across this at this late date, I says, well, maybe they owe me something. So what I did is I called my state senator's office, and I was told to, we have a satellite office in Quincy. I said, fine, I'll have somebody drop me off up there. I'll go up there one day. Took my paperwork, I went up to the office, I finally found it. I went down, the door was closed, it was locked, there was nobody home. I went back home, and I waited a couple of days, I called the office, and I talked to somebody, and they says, oh no, there should have been somebody there, somebody would be there, you know, such and such a time. I says, fine. I ended up going back up there, right? The same procedure, the office was locked, there was nobody home, I don't know if they were out to lunch or where they were gone. So I called the office and I talked to somebody and I told them I'd like to speak to somebody in your office that handles military problems. And they says, he's not in today. I said, fine, right? Hung up the phone. I looked up another senator's telephone number, and I called. And I got a hold of a young gentleman, and actually it happened to be lunchtime, and I talked to him for a while, and he took down all my information. We talked for about 10 minutes over the phone. He said, "I'll get back to you." Well, my memory isn't that good anymore, and it slipped by anyways. I never got a return phone call. So what I'm here tonight to ask, does anybody know anything about this tax refund money? And that's my question. Not only that, but according to these numbers, there's probably a lot more guys in this state right here that are involved in this that don't even realize it. You know, it's like the women veterans don't know they're veterans. They're all veterans. They serve, they're veterans, right? The American Legion, I belong to Post 118 down at Cohasset. American Legion points us out all the time. And I used to say this all the time at the VFW in Hull. Without the Women's Auxiliary, the men's post would never exist. And believe me, the men's post in Hull is not what it used to be. It's there, but it's not what it used to be. The guys trying to hold it together are doing a good job. It's not what it used to be. So anyways, that's my question. I don't know if anybody can answer me, anybody can look into it for me. I have a card with my address on it. If you'd like it, I'll give it to you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for your service. I appreciate that. From my standpoint, I'm not familiar with the particulars of that legislation that you're referring to on the federal side and how that interacts with any state legislation. But that being said, it's something that, you know, I'd definitely be interested in getting more information from you. And if anyone else here on our panel has any information that you may have on that, feel free. But I would like to follow up.
Thank you. And with that said, the representative mentioned also that if you have a question that you don't want to come up to the microphone for, or it's something personal, or you think is a your only type of question that you don't feel comfortable coming to the mic, they're going to hang around afterwards for a little bit. So make sure you talk to them. And this is your chance. These are your legislators. These are the people that can answer those questions for you or take your name and put that to bed. Okay?
Do you have a card, Mr. Mickett? I mean, I know how to find it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you have a card, I'll take it now, but I know how to find it. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
thank you for your attention. I appreciate it, and you're absolutely right.
Thank you. Any other questions? So one of the things, the pieces of legislation that I was speaking to, were two things actually. One was with Rep. Murphy's office, was looking at what we call the Valor Act. So the Valor Act, under the Valor Act, it allows veterans, if adopted by their board or their mayor, if they have a mayor, if adopted by their form of government, that those veterans can work in the veterans office for 125 hours and receive a $1,000 property tax abatement. So if I saw $1,000 laying on the ground, I'd probably knock you over to get it. So with that said, we have people that do all sorts of work. We currently just opened the Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall. It's open every other Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2. It's staffed with 2 volunteers that rotate in there. 4 hours on a Saturday, that person gets 125 hours, which I'll talk about why I brought him into the picture on that in a minute. They get $1,000 off their fourth quarter taxes. I thought this is a great idea. Well, one thing happened along the way. The Valor Act came, was signed into law, and it was great. The program worked for a little while until the minimum wage went up. So that 125 hours is actually 97 and a half now with the current minimum wage. So in order to keep pace with that, we just need a little bit of a language change, and I know that people and staffers at Jamie's office have taken that up on the Hill. So I see another question. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name's Drew Horn. I've lived in Hingham and Weymouth for about 45 years. And I have this question. I was born in New York and entered the Army from New York. And And I was wondering if I am considered to be a Massachusetts veteran. I'm a little confused about whether or not I am or not.
So, Mr. Horn, so in Massachusetts, a veteran is defined by anybody who has served our country 90 days during a period of war or 180 days continuously outside of a period of war. Did you complete more than your...
Yeah, I spent 2 years during the Korean War.
Absolutely. So you not only are a U.S. veteran, but after 1 day of residency here in the Commonwealth, you too are a Massachusetts veteran with any benefit and service that is in statute to that. So thank you, and I hope if tonight you realize that you are Massachusetts veterans, congratulations.
Thank you very much. And there's one other thing I wanted to say is that
Yes, sir.
Thanks to George, I went to the VA because I was hearing problems, and the VA in Jamaica Plain was good enough to give me these hearing aids. And the reason I rose to talk about it is because I had assumed that I had to be hearing disabled. And I found that that's not true. And all you have to do is be a veteran and have a hearing problem, and they provide hearing aids for you.
So that's correct, sir. You were allowed to have any type of hearing or eyeglasses. These glasses here that I'm wearing now are from the VA. You simply need to be signed up for the VA healthcare system. I know the colonel in the back, if you wanted to enlighten us a little more on that, but you simply have to be signed up. How do you get signed up? There's 3 easy ways. 1, you fill out the form, the 1010 EZ. You drive to the nearest VA hospital, Brockton, Jamaica Plains, or West Roxbury. You present that along with your discharge, your DD-214 from any state. And you are, if so, you served during Korean War. Each period of time is different for each veteran. It may be 90 days for some. It may be 190 days for others. There may be that you didn't serve in any type of conflict, and in that case, they would then use your means. They would use your income to determine your eligibility. So just by simply wearing the uniform of the country does not, unfortunately, get you through the doors of the VA. That's a little bit of a misnomer, but that's also a small amount of service personnel. Just to follow up with what the secretary said, yes, you are, with one-day residency, you are here. The only thing that I can think of, and my colleagues are here in the room as well, that you wouldn't be eligible for, which I run into a lot, that's people that relocate here to, especially Linden Ponds. They come from other states. They hear about the veterans bonus, the welcome home bonus, and the different bonuses that we have going back all the way to, I think it was French and Indian War or something, but it goes all the way back. And they give you a small bonus or annuity. You must have been a Massachusetts resident 6 months prior to your enlistment, so you had to be in the state. This is probably one of the only things that I can think of, guys, is the bonus would be the only thing that you would be ineligible for, but you're definitely a Massachusetts veteran.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm not looking for a bonus. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Colonel, would you like to elaborate on any of that? If you just come to the mic, we can sew some of that up. Or? Yeah, this one over there.
Yeah, well, either one, that's fine. Hey, good evening, all. I think I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you before. Dave Hingham, I'm the outreach coordinator for VA Boston Healthcare. Started there about 6 years ago. I couldn't even spell VA. All right, so, but again, I came out of the infantry and the Army, so I'm not good at spelling a lot of stuff. But anyway, I got to tell you, one thing I found, though, it's best care anywhere. It is tremendous care if you can use it. And we've been working with VSOs across the area, and Jeff, and then Secretary Urena now, who was up in Lowell, and then Boston, and now, of course, he's helping make things better in the States. So we're all what we call one team, one fight. You know, you get the Navy guys and the Army and the Air Force, and everybody's got their way of doing stuff. But when it comes to certain things, we coordinate our efforts so we get the mission accomplished, right? So it's one team, one fight. And same way at the VA. We're all tied in very closely. Network. If you didn't know, of course, a lot of you know Keith is just tremendous, but Keith Jermyn here is the VSO in town and who had kind of set the standard. We created these regional veterans councils, and it was really due to Keith and a couple other veterans that helped, were the catalyst for forming this. So we have regional groups now where we meet and coordinate and talk about things like this with all the town VSOs and anybody that's interested. So we have the Plymouth Regional Council, Brockton, Metro West, Norfolk County. So anyway, and so Keith, I just want to give you a hand for doing that great work. That was... wasn't necessarily in his job description. So just kind of make it short and simple. Of our 350-some thousand veterans in the Commonwealth, about a third of them or more are using VA health care, okay? Or actually in the healthcare system. There's another third that or more actually in this area because they had that income, the geographic means test. So if you're making over about 50,000, between 50 and 60,000, you're going to be close on whether or not you can walk in and use the VA. All right, but if you have a service-connected disability, it doesn't matter what you make. That's awesome, right? So if you have a service-connected disability, so somebody even like me, I was over and got 30 years in the Army, can't walk in and use VA, but with the service-connected disability, I can use it. Doesn't matter, you get a couple $100s a month or whatever it is, and depending on your level of connection, but that opens the door to use VA health care, and that can be any number of things. Hearing is a common one. That's a great one. That's a walk in the door as soon as you get connected. Gulf War veterans, Vietnam-era veterans that are that were served in the vicinity, in the Navy, in the waters off the coast, Thailand. They've expanded it even wider now. But anybody who was over there in the conflict, doesn't matter what you make. You can be a millionaire. You can walk in the door and use the VA healthcare system. So there's about a third of our veterans, though, that could be using, aren't taking advantage of it. So I'm going to just wrap this up and say this personal story. This is great. I can get the same doctor from Mass General Hospital. I can get him over at the VA, get the same treatment for the same issue, and I can get it done faster. I can actually get an appointment quicker at Boston VA than I can over at Mass General, some of these other hospitals. And you get this, I don't pay any deductibles, and I don't pay any premiums. So tell me what's wrong with that picture. So if you can use it, that's what we're here to do, help you. There's all those great VA benefits. Our friends, our cousins at the Veterans Benefits Administration downtown, JFK building, we work with them on a regular basis about your disabilities and things. But the healthcare side of it is tremendous. Best care anywhere. Got issues? Yeah, they got issues everywhere. Got issues at Tufts, at Mass General. Everybody's got healthcare is always a challenge anywhere you go. But I tell you one thing, VA healthcare is tremendous because they really believe in the mission. About 30-40% of the employees over there are veterans themselves. You walk in the door, if you've never been in the facility, I'm telling you, you'll feel that difference because they know, they've got your back there. So I'm gonna let that go and but come back and see me if you haven't checked into it or whatever. Get her done, right? Get her done. Come on back. I've got all this good stuff. And on top of that, I got all this junk that I don't want to haul back, and I'm just going to give it to Keith afterwards. So come on back and see me. So, got any quick questions?
Yeah, I have a question on the people that work in the hospital, their safety and security. We have 3 out of every 10 veterans coming back from overseas with PTSD. And there's a lot of people there that are worried. Doesn't seem to be any security at the front doors or the gates or anything like going into a courthouse. There's somebody there checking you if you even got a pen.
You think it'd be more comforting if you had that presence up there?
Because there's more and more nurses and doctors being
Sure.
involved today. And
Sure.
You have a situation there that's potentially dangerous.
Okay, that's a good comment. I will take that. I work for the director at Boston VA, so I get to sit with him and tell him these things. I like that. It's actually an interesting concept and maybe worthwhile. By the way, at the front doors now we have valet parking. So when you pull up, you actually get few of you got to do that. That's great too. That's a good comment. And we have some great, by the way, police officers. There's a serving first sergeant in the Army Reserves down at the Brockton VA. And can you hear me? I can hear me. I get this echo. Lisa's waving at me. I don't know. Am I too loud or? And a lot of it's great. We've got I got a caregiver works down the hall from a social worker. She's an NCO at in the Army Reserve, a drill sergeant, and the other one down the other end of the hall is a transportation officer. So that's good stuff. Good comment though. Thank you. Any questions quickly about getting in healthcare? Or? Okay, great. Thank you. Just come back and see me.
Thank you, Colonel.
Thanks.
So in between questions, I'll slip in some more information for you. Here in Hingham, we were able to adopt an act that if a service member, so that's Guard or Reserve, is deployed to OCONUS, that means outside the continental United States, and he presents a copy of his orders to the VSO here in Hingham, and then I take that downstairs, I validate it, take it to the treasurer, your property tax is exempt. That's exempt for the entire time they're used serving overseas. You bring your DMO boarders back in and we start the process off. You don't repay that. It's just forgiven. So that's a great thing we have here. We also have for the workers, the municipal workers, the difference in their pay. So between their base pay and military pay, sometimes when they're mobilized, they incur a large deficit, right? To go serve, to have the privilege to put the uniform on and go overseas somewhere, cost you money. So the town was able to, through a warrant article, unanimously passed that bill that's in conjunction with state law, has to be locally adopted. Hey, we're going to make up the difference of that pay. Okay, so that's another great thing. Excise tax. If you serve more than 180 days outside the Commonwealth, you don't pay. You're prorated. You don't pay. You're not driving on the roads, which is the intent of excise tax, using the state roads. We know you're in Colorado, or you're in Alaska, or you're stationed down at Fort Hood. You took your car with you, and your dad comes in, or your mom, and says, hey, my son or daughter is in Fort Hood. I just got this bill, $455 for excise tax. Well, let me have that, and let's vet it, let's prove it, let's qualify it, and thank you for your service. So those are some of the reasons why we're here tonight, to help give you that information. There may be someone in that room right now that's affected by that knows of somebody, or that's how it's done, to be able to spread the word. There's laws for veterans change significantly day to day. Ryan.
Just to speak to that, we have a summary back here. I became a little late to hand it out to everyone, but it is a summary of all the components built into the Valor Acts and the Home Acts.
Great.
5 years. So we're going to lay out, if you guys want to grab that, it's a good run through of all those components.
That's a great handout to have. Ryan Heffernan works with Rep Moschino, and that's a great thing, a great tool to take. We appreciate you bringing that along. Any other questions? In the back. If you come up so we can hear they can hear you on TV back at home.
I was at a VFW meeting the other day, and we had a speaker, and he said that if you were 100% disabled, you would get your excise tax on your automobile. I think it was for Vietnam veterans. You didn't have to pay your excise tax. And I was trying to find this in any manual, and I haven't heard it anywhere else. But
so what I think you're speaking to is there is a clause. I do have my book here. I'll look it up while I turn this over if someone else wants to elaborate on it. But it is for disabled, and it is for that tax. But you have to actually, there's a very long litany of missing hands, feet, etc. You can't get that just by having the 100% disability. For instance, if I had 100% disability for my shoulder injury, or maybe PTSD, I would be ineligible for that. It's an actual physical disability, but I'm going to look that up for you.
oh, and he also said you had to have a Bronze Star.
Taxes.
He's, Keith, he also said you had to have a Bronze Star, and I haven't found that either.
So with the Bronze Star, if someone else wants to elaborate, the plates, the registration for any Bronze Star veteran, and there's a list of other medals that are also eligible, is free.
Yes,
Your registration is free.
I know about the registration, but he said the excise tax on your car.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. That may, the speaker may have misspoken on that. We definitely know that if you're a property owner and you have a service-connected disability, your taxes, there is a scale that 400 at the minimum that the city or the town would remove off of your taxes, and some cities and towns have some more flexibility depending on those percentage, whether it's 10%. But then there's also a benefit to those who are 100% and others.
So the law that I think you're referring to is the motor vehicle excise tax exemption for disabled veterans and former prisoners of war. Veterans as defined in Section 7, Chapter 4 of the Mass General Law, who by reason of service in the armed forces of the United States suffered a loss or permanent loss of, like I mentioned, there's a litany here, one or both feet, one or both arms, has permanent visual impairment as determined by the VA or is determined to have by reason of medical advisory board within the registry of motor vehicles to be permanently disabled. So that's something you'd have to go to you'd have to take your VA paperwork if you suffered from one of those conditions. You'd have to go to the registry where they would have a board, and it's possible if you suffered from one of those conditions that your excise tax would be exempt. Correct. But again, there's a litany of actual physical ailments that would preclude a lot, I would say a vast majority of people that receive 100%. So you're talking about a very small percent. So he must have been within that small percentage. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Carol Ruggiero. My husband is currently a patient at the Bedford VA with advanced Alzheimer's, where he's been getting wonderful care. I'm there 4 times a week. My question is to you is how do you deal with the negativity and what's coming out now? Because my telephone's ringing off the hook, about the issues that are up. I've talked to people up there. I'm amazed at the care he gets because I go around and give communion at the local nursing homes and all, and I am absolutely amazed at the care he gets as well as the number of staff they have to each patient. But it's upsetting because it's been like 3 times recently, and but they say that there's nothing you can't. We even thought about a bunch of us calling the wives to say, it's not. We don't know if it's that building. We don't know the circumstances.
So, Carol, thank you so very much for that. And so, once again, we, as a state employee, our local partners in the communities, our VA federal partners, that the aspect that's the challenge. We all know, so especially those that use the VA, that trust the VA, that whose husbands are at the VA, know the quality of care that's there. And like Colonel Henka said, even private hospitals have challenges, just as much as the VA is having. It's probably much more than the VA's challenge, but you hear from the VA because obviously it is a higher standard that we want to ensure that those caregivers are being held to. I think what you're referring to, Carol, more recently, there was an aspect of trust that was broken. There was a nurse that claimed that she was visiting a patient every hour on the hour. She filed a report to say that the veteran who happened to have a cardiac arrest, she was let go.
But now why?
And so the aspect of the negative stories, to address the aspect of negative stories, it is up to us to share our good experiences and build trust. I have a hard time with those stories.
How can you do that, though? That's how do you get it out there?
Colonel, I think you stood up. You want to share something to that?
So, yeah, there's no excuse when we hear something like that. That's just absolutely despicable when you hear something. It upsets everybody that's worth their salt. But again, you see, even at quality hospitals, I got to tell you, I've been in places. I've sat in Mass General into here for something else on one night and see people just having terrible times. Nobody's taking care of them. I got up, got a blanket to give it one. I see neglect anywhere. That's why I say healthcare is challenged. So the one good thing about the VA, you got to say, is generally with the number of veterans that are there too, there's that military family bond, right? So I have a feeling that generally when I'm at the VA, if I'm going to go somewhere, I want to go to the VA because I know that if I'm incapacitated, generally there's going to be somebody in there that's going to have my back, maybe more so than somebody else. But yeah, so just one little story. I was at Bedford VA, so I work over here to make a plane, but I went to Bedford VA once a year. They have a memorial service. Have anybody been to that?
I went to it this year.
Oh, yeah. Were you there this year?
I was.
Oh, so did you hear? I was the speaker. Right. Okay. All right. So you heard the story that so the nurse.
You could tell everyone
had a nurse. She had us all in tears. They talked about how the caregivers got around of one of the veterans who was end of life. He was in his last hours, I guess. And I think they all came in the room. They all rubbed his feet. They all held his hand, his arm, and they just a group of them. And wow, I'm telling you, that's nothing but right. Yeah.
They absolutely say that someone just passed last week up there, but no veteran ever dies alone. Someone is with them.
Yeah.
You know, whenever that happens.
And then that's a pledge. So I've seen the really powerful, good things they do. So those issues have got to be addressed.
But you know, when it's the VA, it's the front page of the Boston Globe.
Yeah, they're digging into that.
You know, and it's, you know, but then.
And if nothing else, not that I can do anything about that other than say that I'm sorry, that's a shame, and by God, there's a lot of great people that are up in arms about that, so.
And it happened in Manchester, and they did, you know, there was a big change up there. But it's too bad that something positive can't be put out on the front page.
No, absolutely. And sadly, is the interest that good stories don't sell papers. And
No,
that's the aspect. But so I just came back from Washington Monday and Tuesday where I was there. One of the topics that was being discussed, there's a program, it's called Veterans Experience. And the Office of Veterans Experience is going to be releasing a lot of the good news stories that come out as press releases and the such. And we'll see how well adapted they will be. It's also putting a lot of public service announcements because every time we see one of those stories, we know it deters other veterans from using it. Just as an aside, I spoke to a Vietnam veterans, and I do see here in the audience several of you all. So to our Vietnam veterans here, thank you for your service and welcome home. But there was a Vietnam veteran, I call him a friend, and I said, hey, have you thought about coming to the VA? He said, I had a terrible experience at the VA. And I said, a lot of things have changed. I said, what year was that? He says, 1965. I said, just a few things have changed, but that's essentially what we have. A bad experience for some become just that. But let me tell you that there are a lot of great things happening at the VA in our partnerships, the delivery of services, the outreach, folks like Dave and his team who are in the communities, ensuring we spread those news. But I'm really happy to hear from you, and I wish you and your husband the very best.
Yes, I just am very happy with the treatment he's getting there.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I also just wanted to add that if any of you have not been to the VA and you're curious about it, you want to know what does it look like, what does it feel like when you walk in there, next Wednesday from 11 to 2, there will be an open house at our 3 main campuses, so Brockton, West Roxbury, and Jamaica Plain. As you go in the main lobby of of each of those facilities, you'll see an open house, lots of information, people that can answer your questions, and it is a normal business day, so you can see what it looks like and what's going on at that time. Come ask your questions. Come check it out.
And at 12:30, if you just happen to be there, fun place to be, 12:30 at the VA, at every one of those locations, there's going to be a short set of briefings. There'll be 5-6 different offices, programs talking about the things they do, Gulf War studies, Agent Orange things, senior care, caregiver services to support people that are caring for other veterans. And so they're going to jump up. They're right at 12:30. So that's the time to be there in the lobby at Jamaica Plain, the lobby at West Roxbury, and then up by the cafeteria for folks that go to Brockton. There's that open area on the second floor, and you go in the cafeteria. They'll be in the briefing right in the cafeteria. So, good point. Yeah, they have the groups for those that are giving care. You wonder, how do I take care of somebody? How do I handle this burden? Well, there's all those great services, programs. They have the specialists, the social workers that help you apply and know how to care for somebody. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ray Miller. I'm from Hanover, Mass. 30-year Coast Guard veteran. And one of the things I noticed with the VA is that there's a huge backlog of cases. Is there any time frame that's reasonable? Now I'm hearing like it's 2 to 3 years for some of these cases.
Yes, sir. So today, just this week at training, as the secretary mentioned, we get briefed by the director. So What we heard was that for Massachusetts, and you're talking about, just to be clear, you're talking about the VBA, so that's the Veterans Benefits Administration, which is not the Veterans Healthcare Administration. It's two separate things. It's tough for people sometimes to realize that, but one really doesn't talk to the other unless we make it. So it was said that in our area is all of New England, the normal case range day, that's a normal case with nothing really crazy, but nothing, it was done right, put together, the forms were signed, everything's I's were dotted, T's were crossed. The average claim return is 85 days. That's for a claim. Unfortunately, as we all know, the VA, as of recently as the last 5 years, went to a mandatory overtime to tackle the backlogs, which ranged over 880,000. They were able to get that down to, was it about 100,000, Colonel? Yes, sir. They got it to 100,000, but because they did that and focused directly on those claims, the appellates, which may be what you're talking about, and I'm not sure, but the appellates or the appeals now went to a 3 to 5 year window. So by focusing on the claims to get those adjudicated correctly and quickly, they focused their attention on that and are able to deliver, on average, an 85, in our region, just in our region, an 85.5 day case return. The quickest one I've ever seen was 1 week, and I know there's a gentleman in this room who's coming up on a year that I know should be something very simple, and it's not. So it's a case by case. Yes, sir.
But it's a misnomer. It's clouded, and the reason why is because they reject them right away. And they reject them because that goes right to an appellate, which you can wait 3 to 5 years. So you're right in the fact that let's just get them out of the way, but let's reject 90% of them and let's get them in an appellate, which will wait 3 to 5 years. So they look good on one side, but they don't look good on the other side.
Sir, I'm going to disagree with you on that. And again, that's a federal aspect. They're not doing that purposely. There's no savings in that. They are, for example, if the application is not completed, that is why we recommend that our veterans work with their local veteran service officers to file their claims. Often enough, filing a claim, you may not put the right aspect of what the evidence was. So you're claiming broken arm, but you don't place the x-rays and your treatment and the VA, whatever it was. There's some things that are set in there, and the VA whether rates you on what you present, and what you don't present, they don't rate you. So, but they're not trying to send things to an appeal because they know that there's another process. There is some good news on the aspect of appeals.
5 different
We
ways.
have now several different ways, as opposed to just waiting for the appellate judges to take those appeals. There are 5 different ways. So there is a focus on now reducing the claims from the appellate so that we can process. The good news is that benefits date back from the date of application. So again, there's no savings into say, hey, we're going to send that to the appellate. And we have a lot of trust. I hate to kind of promulgate that type of message because for people in here who may not have filed a claim, they may think, oh, forget about it, I'm not going to do it, and it's not the case.
I looked at the percentages and they've gone up.
They have, and I think it's because of the same aspect. They rated the ones that they were able to with the data that they have in front of them, and then, yes, they sent some to the aspect.
That's what I form my opinion
Sure.
on.
Yes. Sure. And we also have great partnerships with other service organizations, whether it's the American Legion, the VFW, you name it, federal charter organizations do have national service officers whose role is to be well trained into how filing claims so that when the veteran or veteran spouses is sitting in front of them, they could place as much information there, send it once it's complete so they could have the best level of success.
The fastest process is to go through the DAV in Boston. I'm telling you right now, that's the
Sure.
fastest process.
It is an option.
Go through a VSO, there's a lot of.
There is an option.
Slows it down a little bit because they have to go to the
Yep.
DAV.
It is an option. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Marine. Go ahead. I guess we'll go here.
Good evening. About 14 years ago, I went to Bob Haviland, who's the VSO, and I had tried to get into the VA. And they said, well, it's 6 months to get in the VA. So I went to the VA and I said, where can I sign up? And they said, oh, you can sign up on this list. This is about another 6 months. Now, that's how it was at that time. But Bob Haviland introduced me to Chapter 115, and since that time, it's been just perfect. And the wonderful care we've had is outstanding. My wife has gone ahead and had, under 115, 9 stents put into her carotid arteries. She had a number of other procedures that she had to have done, which included extensive operations, etc. I've had 5 different types of cancer, which are treated, and I'm cancer-free right now, I believe, by going to the VSO, going to Mass General, going to South Shore, etc., and getting wonderful service and being able to get appointments at a good time, good clip. And I just want to say that 115 is a wonderful program, and it shouldn't be neglected. You should take advantage of it. It's just terrific. And the care that we receive from Keith and from Lisa is just wonderful also.
Thank you very much for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
Appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know, that's the Chapter 115 that we had mentioned in the law since, around the Civil War. The Commonwealth has decided to take care of those who qualify, veterans and their dependents, 100% medical coverage. So that gentleman who was brave enough to stand up to tell you his story, how much do you pay, John, for all that world-class care that you got at the Mass General?
I paid nothing. I had no co-payments. I've never paid for a prescription. I mean, it's just fabulous. I mean, it's, and if I asked for transportation, you'd get me there too.
Thank you.
And I mean it.
Awesome. Thank you for that great testimony. I think, Drew, you were...
I'd just like to make one comment.
Sure.
The VA medical system throughout the country is probably...
Drew, I think you need to use the mic for the folks at home to be able to listen.
VA system throughout the country is probably one of the finest jewels in the crown of democracy. But the jewel is being chipped. It's being chipped every day by people that don't understand how it works and why it works and who it works for. They're trying to privatize it. They've taken $50 million out of it instead of leaving it where it belongs, and supposedly you can go out and get private people to work on you. But meanwhile, they're taking the money away from the veterans. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Drew. And let me be clear on that point. It is a great system. The aspect of veterans, the access of veterans getting in, once they get to the doors of the VA, is a great system. But for veterans that live in rural places, and yes, we do have some veterans outside of Massachusetts that just live in middle of many places far away from VA, and so the aspect, that's why the choice program is there for veterans who's 30 miles, 50 miles away from an aspect of care, so that they could get care at their choice. And what we see here in Massachusetts, veterans that live more than 50 miles from a VA often enough say whether they'll wait past the 30 days because they know the quality of care, just as you know, Drew. It is...
Papers in the news, it's in small print, very soft talk.
Correct. Sure. Thank you. Sir?
Hi. Good evening. I'm John Kirby. I'm from Norwell. Navy veteran, disabled, and I do go to the VA, and great service, love it there. See the same doctor all the time, and she's, she has a good case file on me, so good relationship. My question pertains to the water contamination event that is at Camp Lejeune. I was stationed there during that time, received the paperwork in the mail, basically said, well, that's nice. When I get one of these diseases, I'll do something about it. I've been told that's wrong, and I should be more proactive about it. Is there any recommendation that you can offer on how to proceed or get on the record at this point? And God forbid I don't have to use it.
Sure. So there is so for what John is speaking about is a time period that was set by the VA. For folks who have had experiences, there was some wells that were contaminated in the source because of...
1987.
but there was a time period. What, 87 to...
50, I think it's 53 to 87.
Yes. So is the Camp Lejeune 53 to 87. And so there are some pre-designated diseases that if the person that has contracted or has have shown up, that they are qualified for the aspect of a claim, and those claims will be processed that much quicker. There's also a registry, and I do recommend signing up for the registry if you serve during those time periods, where again, it will fast track you in a sense to get the data. If more diseases get added to that list, because there are some that did not make the last round of the executive order that the president signed and that VA secretary authorized, that is what I definitely recommend, is signing up for the for that aspect. Dave, I know you have more on that.
Any Marine that was, or Navy corpsman
Sailor.
this morning, anybody was there at Camp Lejeune, that's another automatic walk in the door. You can be a millionaire, it doesn't matter. You walk in the door if you were at Camp Lejeune as well during that time frame. So that's another one that's great open door.
So just to add to that, you had to have served in the active or reserve component cumulatively for 30 days. 30 days. You mean you couldn't have just stopped overnight, passed through there, and unfortunately, maybe, let's say, you developed one of those presumptive conditions, those cancers that are listed on the list, on the website. That would be a hard fight. That would be a hard fight, because the way the law is written now, it says must have served 30 cumulative days. So keep that in mind. And sir, I'm glad that you don't suffer from any of those ailments and conditions. I think you should listen to what the secretary said and get on the registry. I know there's several Gulf War veterans in here. I'm on the Gulf War Veterans Registry. I receive information that maybe quicker than the general public gets it. So at least I know, what was there and what happens and what things have developed, and I'm able to fully take advantage of them by being educated. So I would recommend you go to the environmental coordinator. There's some brochures on the back table there. Pick one up, find your local environmental coordinator, and make an appointment. That appointment is free. So anybody who served in, like, say, the Korean DMZ, if you were in Vietnam, you should have the Agent Orange the Agent Orange registry. There's a list of registries that there are known contaminants. That information is on the back table. So if you think you were somewhere where you think it was questionable, go and get that exam. If for no other reason, it's a baseline. If you're perfectly healthy, sir, and again, I'm glad you are, that's now your baseline. What's to say what's going to happen to you in 20 years, right? So now you have set that baseline.
Thank you. There's also a similar registry for those of our generation who were among burn pits. There is a burn pit registry, and essentially, again, for that baseline and also for the aspect of any new known diseases that may be attributed to such exposures. Next question? No? Sir.
John Collins from Norwell. And my question is, Norwell's VSO is the third least paid veteran service officer in the state. We're a wealthy town. We should be paying them a lot more. I'd like to know what legislature we can put in to have a minimum pay rate for these VSOs, because my fear is that once this gentleman leaves, we won't be able to replace them for what they're paying, and we won't have qualified people applying for that job.
Thank you, John, for that. So in Massachusetts, there is a legislature that requires there's a veteran service officer in every city and town. While that is as vague as it is, but at least a start of any possible changes. And so I do recommend having a conversation with your local state representative. I do recommend having a conversation with the Association of Veteran Services Officers, because you may have a potential opportunity there for somebody to take that idea and place it into a bill that can make it into law. Okay. Again, municipal veteran service officers are municipal employees. They're not paid by the state, so they are local veteran agents, town officials, just as much as Keith and the rest of our phenomenal VSOs are. But just wanted to make sure that that is a clear point.
So with that said, as well, the law states that any city or town with a population of over 12,000 shall have a full-time veteran service officer. So again, you're a municipal employee, you're bound to what the personnel board in that town or city or town classifies you as. You're not supposed to also be, the dog catcher or something else. You need to just be the VSO. If your town or city is under 12,000, you must have a part-time VSO. Part-time, very vague, doesn't say, is he open 1 day, 3 days? It doesn't say. But again, it's a start. And with that said, if you're not a full-time, or you're not part-time, or you have no one, like I believe currently someone stood up from Hanover, there is currently no Hanover VSO on the books that's in compliance with state law. You run the risk of, or trying to form a district. It's not a risk, it's actually a good thing. Hingham, Cohasset, and Situate at one time were a district. There's probably other districts that are close by that you know of. Down the Cape, there's over 15 cities and towns that make up that district down there, and they work rather well. So I believe that's an issue that maybe we could have the president, if he...
Sure. So we're working with the secretary on those type of issues. So it starts with grassroots as well. So if your community, if you're not being serviced properly by the veteran service officer in your community, or you don't have one, then you need to reach out to your local officials. You need to make them aware of that. The one thing is there are tremendous benefits out there that are available. But where do people go to find that information? They should be going to a local VSO. If you use Google to try to search your benefits, you know where that's going to lead. It's very confusing. So VSOs are the front line, your local option to seeking benefits and services. So through intake, I kind of refer to us as more case managers than anything else. We have an intake process, sit down and review the situations with clients, review their finances, their service background, their medical conditions. So through that process, you can align them with local, state, and federal benefits that are going to benefit them. So that's the importance of a VSO. It's your local VSO that makes a difference, that provides you with life-changing, life-altering hearing aids. Those are quality of life issues. And where are they delivered? Within your community.
Thank you. Another question? So there's about 5 more minutes left, so we're going to ask for, if you'd like a question, just please stand up, form a line so we know how many of you there are.
Hi, I'm Sid Elliott from Hanover, and I became involved in trying to establish a full-time veterans agent in the town of Hanover when I went to our existing VSO, explained that I needed hearing aids, and he said to me, "There's nothing I can do for you." I went over to Brockton. I became my own advocate. I am in the system. I'm part of the Million Veteran Movement. I'm on my second set of hearing aids. I'm in the dental program. I've been through the MOVE program. It is phenomenal, phenomenal treatment. Hanover, for over 20 years, was non-compliant, knowingly non-compliant with the state law. There is no way a district should have ever consisted of Hanover and Duxbury. There are 2 towns between Hanover and Duxbury. When the town manager and the Board of Selectmen admitted in many public meetings that they were knowingly non-compliant, the town manager said, "For 5 years, I have wanted a full-time veterans agent in the town of Hanover." In 5 years, he never budgeted for one. Then, all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, the town administrator from Hanson, which already shares a school system and a town inspector with Whitman, decides to reach out to Hanover to see if they can create a district. Part of the reason they want to create a district is they also want to share a conservation agent. I'm sorry. The law is the law is the law. And somebody from the Commonwealth, be it you, be it Charlie Baker, has to say to the town of Hanover, you've got 16,000 people, for 20 years you're non-compliant, you have almost 500 veterans families in the town, and it's not about what services you are getting, it's about what services are available that are not being offered. It's not a job where you sit behind a desk and wait for the phone to ring. You find out what's there, you present it to the people you're supposed to be serving. And don't ever tell me it's a budget issue. And that's the excuse in Hanover. It's a budget issue. I'm sorry. But somebody has to step up and say to Hanover, do it. And I would appreciate your help.
Thanks, Sid. Sid, that is something we are actively working with, and I could promise you that before the next budget year, we will make sure that that town, those communities will all be in compliance. Thank you, Sid. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I'm also from Hanover. My name's Maureen Elliott. We do not have a veterans agent. Man in Duxbury is not well. So our town manager has appointed our assistant town manager to be the fill-in for the veterans agent, and he's never had training. He knows nothing. Is that legal?
So the only person that can actually fill in is the town clerk
That's
to
what I
administer, to only and solely administer the Chapter 115 benefits. That's a very small portion of the people. So I'm going to give you a statistic here, and everyone, Hingham is a very affluent town. We know that. And if I was to tell you that 30 people live 200% below the federal poverty line, I think there would be some gasps. Currently on the rolls in Hingham, there are 30 families and or dependents, widows, widowers, or veterans that live below that line that are serviced by 115. Cohasset, a neighboring town, has about 9. They too do not have a current VSO because one has left and not filled. So that they're using that system, which is the town clerk. But it's only, you can't go in and do what this gentleman did with the hearing aids. You can only get that really needed money and medical care, and it must be delivered by the town clerk.
Okay, so the town is also in violation having the acting town manager serve in this capacity. On a very positive note, my whole family's veterans. My grandmother was a Gold Star mother. Hi, Jane. I'm very proud to say my daughter's a nurse at the VA hospital.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone who's in the VA hospital for what they do. My primary care physician was at Mass General. I was talking to Dr. Winikoff one day, and I said to him, oh, yeah, Lauren's working over the VA hospital in West Roxbury in the spinal care unit. He goes, oh, Jesus, I worked there, too. And I just laughed. I thought, here I am getting these big bills, and my husband's seeing the same doctors. So thank you.
Thank you. So we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to have the Paul Healy from the Board of Selectmen to give us a wrap-up. Again, I believe the legislators and our guests will be here afterwards, so if you have something personal, I would urge that you do that.
I'm Captain Bob Morabito, fighter pilot, Vietnam, left there in the 60s, 100% DAV. And I just want to say I want to thank all the veterans that are here and those who are supporting the veterans. When I first came home, it kind of called me like a baby killer. The whole world changed since then. It's a different thing. And now I want to thank these people over here very, very, very much, particularly Fransico here, our director, secretary, and everyone here went through the effort to come down here and help these veterans. I've been very fortunate, and the DAV has been very, very good to me, very good to me. I wound up an agent in Orangefield, and my life came home. It was perfect. So I want to thank everyone here for what they're doing to make it even better. I don't know if they can. The Veterans Affairs have been very, very good to me, and many veterans I served with as a pilot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming tonight. Following up with that last gentleman's comments, I'd like to add a couple of my own. I had the pleasure and privilege of attending the graduation of Lima Company, 3rd Battalion at Paris Island 2 weeks ago. And I can assure you that this country is in good hands. When my own son, who's a veteran, returns from his tour of duty in December, I am very grateful that we have the high caliber veteran service officer in our town, the commitment that's been demonstrated by our elected officials, the secretary. America's in good shape. Thank you very much for coming.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the event. Again, if you have specific questions, I urge you to come up, mingle with the other veterans that are here, their families and the legislative aides, and get your voice be heard. Thank you for coming.